So I made an attempt at inviting people forward so that we could be in community together, also so that we can be heard throughout our discussion. And I have an extra mic here that we can circulate when the time comes. So there is an age-old custom that instead of doing a sermon on the Friday night after the high holidays, the rabbi brings some of the things that were in draft 1 or draft 2 or draft 5, draft 7, but didn't quite make the final cut of one of their high holiday sermons. You may recall that I talked about blessing on Erev Rosh Hashanah and how it can fix some of the fractures in our world. Maybe just in our individual worlds, but perhaps having some kind of butterfly effect and really reach a way that we can come together anew in this new year. So I wanted to share a few of these pieces with you. You might have remembered that I handed out a blessing card, a starter pack, blessings for beginners, if you will. And it had 3 blessings. The first was a blessing for the next generation. The second was blessing a friend. And the third was blessing someone who had wronged us. So let's take a look at the first one. And you might have remembered that I told a story about one of the first times that my wife Miranda joined us at our Shabbat table. This first blessing is the traditional blessing that's bestowed from parents to children on Friday nights, right before we eat, right before we bless the challah. We make this blessing. And if we read it, we see that it says, Yisimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim v'chimnashe, Yisimech Elohim keSarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. May God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. So Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, that seems quite obvious to us, right? We want our people, our Jews of today, to be strong, like our ancestors, like our foremothers. Ephraim and Manasseh, however, that stumps us a little bit. Who were Ephraim and Manasseh, first of all? Yes, Steve? Yes. Okay, I guess I'm going to repeat all of the answers. Joseph's sons in the palace. So Joseph's sons grew up in Egypt, in Pharaoh's palace. Joseph was Pharaoh's right-hand man for the second half of his life. And they were around all of this kind of idol worship all the time, and they still remained in their kind of Israelite mentality. Okay, so given just that knowledge, why do we think Ephraim and Manasseh would have been chosen for this blessing? Why do we want to bless our children in their names? Yeah, Alan. In that book of the Torah, those are the only siblings that got along. That's one of the thoughts that emerge, one of the camps of thoughts that emerges from the rabbis. Okay, great, right? We had Cain and Abel. Obviously, there was a murder there. Then we had, who was next? Who were our siblings? Yes, Isaac and Ishmael, right? We heard about them over Rosh Hashanah. They did not exactly get along. Then we had, who was next? Great, Jacob and Esau. At the end of their relationship, they hadn't seen each other for quite some time, and before they buried their father together, the very last words that Jacob heard were, "If I find him, I'm going to kill him." We almost had Cain and Abel all over again. Also, we have Rachel and Leah, who are up here. They didn't exactly get along either. I think it would be probably pretty challenging to get along with your sister if you were married to the same person. So we have all of these different sibling rivalries, and now, finally, we have Ephraim and Manasseh, who not only were not willing to kill each other, were not willing to spar in a violent way, but decades later, in the founding of the kingdom of Israel, the nation of Israel, Ephraim and Manasseh, those two tribes, were willing to work together. Amazing. So we bless our children by Ephraim and Manasseh because we hope that our children will not have violent interactions, but in fact be able to be in community together, to work together, to create something fruitful and beautiful together. Okay, why else might we bless our children by Ephraim and Manasseh? Yeah, David.
I was just going to say that it's nice to think that they got along, but the Torah really doesn't tell us much about Ephraim and Manasseh. They talk about Manasseh's tribe splitting, so within Manasseh, they probably didn't talk to each other, but the Torah really doesn't say much about Ephraim and Manasseh. So they're clean, they're pure, because, everybody else is described in gory, detail, and it's not good. So it's kind of like a good by default.
That's true. So they are also ripe for our later sages of the Talmud to really pick up on this relationship and say, I don't see any serious fighting here. It must not have happened. So you're right in that respect, absolutely. Why else would we bless our children by Ephraim and Manasseh? Yes.
They're following a tradition of their parents.
Exactly.
Parents, so they're bringing down the tradition for us.
Beautiful. So they continue the mimetic tradition from parents to children, not just in aspects of, we are Jews, we identify as Jews, but they actually continued in a ritual way. They continued to have a solid Jewish identity, not only when nothing else was going on, but in the face of a place that did not make space for them, Egypt, where they were constantly interacting with idolatry. They were in a place that was not a Jewish space, and we don't know anything about that, right? So we bless our children by Ephraim and Manasseh in order that they will continue to be a part of the Jewish community. And not only that, but that they will have Jewish children and that they will bring them up in some kind of Israelite back then, Jewish community today. I also want to emphasize that when we give this blessing, we, of course, are supposed to give it to our own children, but that should not deter us from giving it to people who we consider our next generation. This can be nieces and nephews. It can be nieces and nephews' friends. It can be people that we taught or mentored. This is a way of saying, look, I want to pass something down to you. I want you to remain strong in XYZ, and also I want you to create a world of peace. That's what Ephraim and Manasseh are about. Okay, excellent. So the second blessing we talked about was blessing a friend. This blessing originated from a table of learned people who did not have their children among them or did not have children. So this is really a blessing that we say to one another, to our own generation, perhaps. The words are, may God bless our friendships to be like that of Naomi and Ruth, Jonathan and David, and all the study partners throughout the Talmud. We're going to focus on Naomi and Ruth, but I'd like to just unpack quickly the latter two categories. So the study partners in the Talmud had a really intimate relationship, not only with each other, but with the text in front of them as well. There were intellectual pieces that allowed them to continue to grow closer and closer together. So that's a piece of this blessing. Jonathan and David, this is King David, David HaMelech, and he had this amazing relationship with Jonathan, who was in fact his study partner, but also a partner in life. They did a lot of different things together, and he actually ended up saving David's life. Then we have Naomi and Ruth. And we'll get there. So this piece, Naomi and Ruth, I brought a little piece from the book of Ruth. And the context here is that the land of Israel was hit by a terrible drought. And so a man named Elimelech moves his family, his wife Naomi and his 2 sons, from the city of Bethlehem to Moab. There, his 2 sons marry 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. And 10 years pass, and unfortunately, all 3 of the men in this story die. It's very, very sad. It is now just Ruth, Orpah, and Naomi. Naomi, the mother-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, the daughters-in-law. And it comes to an impasse where Naomi is saying, look, there is nothing left for me here right now in Moab. I need to go back to Israel. I need to go back to Bethlehem where my people are. And Orpah and Ruth and Naomi, they all start going out of obligation. And then there is an impasse where Naomi turns to her 2 daughters-in-law and she says, look, you guys should really go back to the land you came. You can find new husbands, you can have families there, you can be amongst your people, especially in this time of mourning. Orpah says, I'm out of here. I'm ready to go back to my family. And we don't blame her. Ruth says this. Can I get you to read?
Ruth replied?
Yeah.
But Ruth replied, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you dwell, I will dwell. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may God do to me, if anything but death parts me from you.
Wow. What an incredible statement of devotion. So what do we make of this? Why do we think that Ruth says this? Yeah, Jim.
In modern terms, she's virgin.
Okay. Beautiful. I'm so glad that you brought that up. So this text is often used in moments of conversion. And we like to say that Ruth was the very first convert to Judaism, the first official convert to Judaism. She said, I'm no longer interested in idolatry. I'm no longer interested in polytheism. I am interested in the one God. I've seen that this one God is powerful. This is the God that I choose. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say that I want to tie it all together. The original title about the threshing room floor was how she and Boaz got together, and that's how she became the great-grandmother of King David.
Okay, gorgeous. So Steve brings up the threshing room floor. Does anybody know what a threshing room is? Yeah, okay. I'm seeing a lot of hand motions. That's right. That's exactly right. So the threshing room is an actual place still today, an agricultural piece of our lives that we don't actually interact with, but that's where our food comes from. That's why we say God brings forth bread from the earth. The threshing room is where wheat is taken apart. So we leave behind the shaft, the piece that we actually don't grind up or use in our food that's inedible, and we take the wheat pieces and then grind it up and make it into flour. The threshing room is where Ruth meets her second husband, They get married, they have a child, and it is said that David HaMelech, King David, is a descendant of Ruth, and also that someday, if the Messiah comes, that person will be a descendant of Ruth as well. So there's really a lot of love in our tradition given to who we believe to be the first convert to Judaism. Yeah, David.
So I understand the use of this for interpreting it in the context of conversion. I've seen that firsthand. To me, this goes well beyond that because if I read the English, this is talking, this is getting personal. This is not saying that I love Israelites. It's saying that I want to be part of your people. Very briefly, this is inscribed on my mother's matzevah monument. And it's this is a statement of love, compassion, and caring like no other. I have not seen any written by anybody else that surpasses this. This actually demonstrates the relationship between them. Ended up, it's not husband and wife in the context of the Torah, but it's real friendship as this is a blessing of friends. This doesn't get any stronger than this.
Yeah, beautiful.
It applies just as well to marriages, which can go along with intermarriages and can turn into a statement about conversion, but I think that's missed the main point of this, which I think is personal.
Beautiful. So David said a number of things. First of all, he shared with our congregation that this is inscribed on his mom's tombstone, which is very beautiful. And also, he talked about how this is used in some marriage ceremonies, and in fact it is specifically in intermarriage ceremonies, which goes back to this idea of Ruth being the first convert. But at the very base of what this is this is not just saying, okay, I'm ready to be an Israelite or I'm ready to be a Jew. This is saying, I am making a serious, loving commitment with knowledge of what your people are, and I am feeling that I am part of your people. This is an incredible statement of devotion and care and intimate friendship. And that's why we choose this duo to bless our friends by. We want to have those relationships. We want to have that deep connection, not just with a spouse, not just with a partner, but with a friend who really gets us, who knows who we are, and who really wants to be intimately connected to us. Now we come to the third blessing, and I think I actually want to read a bit of the sermon to you because I think that I'm not sure that I can put it in even better words, honestly. This final blessing is offered up from the chambers of our heart that are hardest to reach. The final blessing is one that we bestow on someone who has wronged us. This is not meant for the terrorists or criminals of our world, but for someone who has wronged us personally. This blessing is not about forgiveness, but about striving toward reconciliation and understanding that we can never know someone's full story. It's about blessing someone with whom we passionately disagree, someone who has treated us harshly or cheated us. It's not an easy blessing to say. It's for someone who actually makes us angry, who has made us feel unwanted, or who has raised a child who's bullying our child, for someone who undermines us, for a person on the other side of the spectrum politically in any way. But this blessing is perhaps the most critical of them all. It's the one that breaks down barriers and opens pathways within us for compassion and curiosity rather than resentment and blame. This blessing reads, "Though we stand in disagreement, may we seek out some bit of goodness in the other in order that we may bless and judge each other generously." I want to zoom in on that last piece. And in the Hebrew, it's V'dan lachaf zechut. And it comes from Pirkei Avot. V'heve dan et kol ha'adam lechaf zechut. So you see those three words again, dan lechaf zechut. And that's a pretty well-used phrase. And if we look at here, dan means judge. Et kol ha'adam, every single person in humanity, all of humanity. Lechaf zechut. Okay, so literally, lechaf means the palm of your hand, an openness of hand. And zechut means merit or generosity. So we want to have an open hand and an open heart, an open amount of generosity ready for every single person. That sounds exhausting. And yet, the ethics of our parents tell us that's how we ought to be. Likotei Mehoran, this is Rabbi Nachman, from whose book I took this blessing. He continues to write, and he says, "When you find that bit of goodness and judge that person that way." Okay, let's just start with that. What's that about? When you find that bit of goodness. What does that mean, yeah?
This is following on the looking at that blessing and saying, you're looking for some goodness to be able to then judge generously.
Totally.
When you find it, then you by judging through it, you're elevating the goodness and making it more important in that person, and maybe elevating that person's acceptance of that goodness.
Totally. If we go back to the blessing, you'll see the word nachkor. That word means to investigate. The goodness is not automatically apparent. We have to search for that goodness sometimes. We have to search for that goodness inside of other human beings, especially when they have wronged us personally. Okay, the next piece. And judge that person that way. And judge that person that way. What does that mean? Yeah.
As opposed to looking at them through the lens of the way that they've hurt you, but looking through them in the lens of somebody who has goodness inside.
Exactly. By taking that thing that we investigated, that we discovered, that we searched for within them, and focusing on that, saying, okay, I'm going to judge you based on that simple piece of kindness and goodness within you. You actually may elevate the goodness that they have inside of them. What do we think that means? Alan?
No one is 100% good, no one is 100% bad. So if you find someone who only has 1% goodness in them, focus on that. And the bad person will say, hey, maybe there's something to this goodness part, and the 1% will grow.
Okay. So if we're able to interact with that person based on that judgment of saying, okay, I've found the goodness in you, you are that good person, I know you have it in you, and we're able to interact with them positively, then perhaps that goodness will grow. So that goodness will grow inside of them. What happens to us when we do this? What do you think? What happens to us when we search out for goodness inside of somebody and then we judge them based on that? Yeah.
Well, I think by praying positively for the person, it's just kind of, and reciprocal, because then you're putting that positivity out there.
Beautiful. So you're putting positivity out there, and that's echoing back throughout the world. Amazing. What else can it do for us? Yeah, Jane. It elevates the goodness in us too. Say more about that.
When you give someone a blessing, you're doing a mitzvah. And mitzvah over mitzvah, one mitzvah, another mitzvah. And in a way you're blessed too because you are blessing someone.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you elevate the goodness inside of you also. And Jane quoted another piece of Pirkei Avot, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, avera goreret avera. A mitzvah, doing a commandment, doing a good deed, leads to us doing another good deed, right? Because it actually feels really good to do good deeds. And also, conversely, if we do averot, it's literally translated as transgressions or sins, if we transgress, that can lead to more transgressions. So even doing just one mitzvah, one good deed, one commandment, we talked about how it lengthens our days, lengthens our lives, right? Can add up to another one and another one and another one. We can all move to a different path at any point. And then suddenly we're doing hundreds and hundreds of mitzvot. So, I hope that we are all able to bless those around us, be they our next generation, who we want to see as our inheritors of the world, be they our closest friends who we hope to grow even closer to as time progresses, or be they people who we would not categorize as our friends, people who we hope will change. Perhaps blessing them will change us. When you find that bit of goodness and judge that person that way, you actually may elevate the goodness that they have inside of them, and elevate the goodness inside of us. Shabbat Shalom.